Good evening and welcome to All 24 News World News program coming to you live from the capital Algiers. Up next are tonight's top stories. Tonight, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza deepens as the United Nations warns of catastrophic conditions amid relentless violence. Meanwhile, Palestinian armed groups claim strikes against the occupation forces in the eastern region. Details just ahead. Also ahead, Arab leaders conclude 34th Arab Summit in Baghdad with urgent appeals to rebuild Gaza. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune warns against attempts to erase the Palestinian cause. He's also demanding sweeping reforms within the Arab League. We'll have full details on these developments shortly. Also in tonight's headlines, Libya faces renewed turmoil as protests turn deadly in Tripoli. Security forces foiled an attempt to storm government headquarters, and the Presidential Council is doubling down on calls for a political solution to the crisis. And later on in the program, Moscow sets conditions for potential Putin-Zelensky talks as the EU prepares fresh sanctions. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump is expected to call Vladimir Putin on Monday to push for a ceasefire. Welcome back. We begin with the devastating developments from Gaza tonight, where Zionist airstrikes have killed at least 11 Palestinians, according to local civil defense officials. Rescue teams are racing against time in Shujaiya neighborhood, where repeated bombardments have targeted displaced families since Friday. The casualties include 4 killed at a school gate sheltering civilians, 2 in a Shujaiya market, and 2 more in a Zaytun neighborhood. In Jabalia camp, women and children among the victims pulled from the rubble, with many still missing. Central Gaza saw 14 killed in strikes on tents and homes near Deir al-Balah, while shelling near Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital left 2 dead. Meanwhile, in Khan Yunis reports at least 10 fatalities, including 3 from Friday's attack on Al-Fakhari. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry reports hospitals received 153 martyrs and 459 wounded in just 24 hours. The total death toll now stands at 53,272 martyrs, with over 120,673 injured since October 7, 2023. Notably, since March 18th alone, the renewed offensive has claimed 3,131 lives and left 8,632 wounded, according to official figures. Despite a fragile ceasefire, relentless strikes continue to shatter lives across the besieged Gaza Strip. A haunting night of fear and devastation was witnessed in the shattered tents of Deir al-Balah to the bomb-out neighborhoods of the north as humanitarian toll grows grimmer by the hour. Zarfar Jani has more on this story.
In the dead of the night, a missile tore through the Deir al-Balah camp, jolting Firas al-Mansi and her children awake. She scrambled through chaos, searching for loved ones amid bloodshed and ruins.
I was sleeping with my children when suddenly the missile fell, and the kitchen flew. I went out calling their names, finally gathering them here. There was a martyr, torn to pieces. We found a leg here and another behind the tents. Look at the blood.
Already surviving 19 months under siege, this strike destroyed their last scraps of food and shelter.
The tent was hit. I had some rice and pasta left, but everything disappeared with the strike. Where can I find food now? We've fled our bomb homes seeking safety here, but we've been bombed 13 times already. Why are they hitting us?
As Deir al-Balah reeled, northern Gaza faces its own nightmare. Over 100 Palestinians killed in 24 hours, one of the deadliest days since the ceasefire collapsed. Homes bombed without warning. The civil defense reports 50 bodies recovered overnight, dozens still trapped.
It was a bloody night in northern Gaza. The occupation bombed several homes directly and without prior warning. More than 50 bodies were recovered and taken to Lawada and Indonesian hospitals. Dozens remain trapped under the rubble.
Within this devastation, displaced Palestinians like Salah and Najjar recount their difficult escape.
The bombing was everywhere, from all directions. Our house collapsed on us while we were inside. Now we are fleeing to Gaza City, looking for any place to pitch a tent, even on the streets.
For many like Youssef al-Masri, the scale and intensity of these bombings are unprecedented.
Since the war began, last night and today were the most intense bombings in 2 years. I was displaced south, returned to Gaza, and now I'm moving south again, following the Israeli army's orders.
The escalation has ignited global outcry, with calls to end the massacre and open aid corridors. Yet, as the Arab League summit convened, hopes for peace dimmed, a plain reminder that the Zionist occupier rejects peace, choosing instead to deepen the cycle of violence, suffering, and despair.
On a related story, at the Baghdad Arab Summit, UN Chief Antonio Guterres delivered a strong condemnation of the occupation's crimes in Gaza. He denounced the repeated forced displacement of Palestinian civilians, declaring that nothing justifies the collective punishment of Gaza's population. The Secretary General also issued a warning against any expansion of military operations in the territory, while calling for urgent international action to address the deteriorating humanitarian situation.
I am alarmed by reported plans by Israel to expand ground operations and more. And I emphasize that the United Nations will not participate in any so-called aid operation that does not adhere to international law and humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, independence and neutrality. And I reiterate my appeal for the urgent and full support of UNRWA's work, including financial support.
For his part, UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk demanded an urgent humanitarian access to Gaza on Friday, condemning the Zionist entity's intensified attacks, including strikes on medical facilities and the mountain civilian tool. In a blunt assessment, UN officials accused the entity of deploying internationally prohibited weapons, warning that no place in Gaza remains safe now after 19 months of conflict. Adding to the outcry, UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese raised alarms over ethnic cleansing, citing systematic targeting of shelters, schools, and hospitals by occupation forces. Meanwhile, Hamas announced its fighters engaged the Zionist military unit sheltering in a building east of Shuja'iyya neighborhood. The group claims 2 soldiers were killed and wounded during the confrontation. In a similar development, Al-Quds Brigades, the armed wing of the Islamic Jihad movement, released video evidence purporting to show the downing of a Zionist Super Heron drone over Gaza City. The group stated its fighters used what appropriate firepower to destroy the aircraft. Just 2 days after the anniversary of the Nakba, thousands took to the streets of London this Saturday, marking the 77th year of the tragedy that continues to cast a long shadow over Palestine and its people. Here's Safian Kanturi with a report now.
Waving Palestinian flags and clutching bold placards, demonstrators chanted, "Palestine, from the river to the sea, will forever remain Palestinian land." Nearly 8 decades since the mass expulsion of hundreds of thousands of indigenous Palestinians in 1948, the Nakba remains a symbol not only for profound loss, but also of unyielding resistance.
I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to travel down from these protests. I live in the north of England, and it's so important that I'm here. At the moment, 300,000 children are on the brink of starvation. As a mother, as a woman, as a humanitarian, we need food to get in. We need the bombing to stop.
Among the crowd were British citizens, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity.
So I've been a firefighter for nearly 20 years now. I've seen things through my career that average people don't really see, but this past year, 19 months now, I've seen things coming through on my Instagram feed on a daily basis that I've never witnessed in this country.
And voices like Simina's, an emergency physician, remind us that this is no distant history.
I think we need to put pressure now on professional bodies, on government agencies that have the power to stop this, and in the name of the tenets of our profession, which are to alleviate suffering, to preserve life, to safeguard others from harm, and to bring dignity to the dying.
In the heart of London street, the Nakba's memory is kept alive in the present tense, now recognized as an ongoing genocide, one that has persisted unabated since 1948.
In other news, the 34th Arab League Summit wrapped up in Baghdad on Saturday with a strong unified message. Leaders unanimously called for international action to rebuild Gaza, an immediate ceasefire and urgent humanitarian access. The final declaration pushes the UN Security Council to implement a two-state solution with a defined timeline. Iraqi president, in the meantime, highlighted the summit's display of regional unity, attended by top officials, including the UN and Organization of the Islamic Cooperation chiefs, along with European Union representatives. On the same occasion, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, represented by Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attar, found that Zionist occupation is advancing absurd plans to impose its own vision of peace, threatening to erase Palestinian rights. President Tebboune called for urgent Arab unity to counter existential threats to the Palestinian cause.
A few days ago, the Arab League marked the end of its 8th decade, while our Arab world continues to grapple with mounting challenges unprecedented in its modern history. Our central cause is facing liquidation schemes that relentlessly target it amid the occupation's insistence on imposing its absurd vision of peace. A vision it can only imagine on its own terms, tailored to its whims and designed to satisfy its ambitions. A so-called peace built on the ruins of the Palestinian cause. A peace in which neighboring countries are deprived of the most basic elements of their security, stability and reassurance. A peace that grants it absolute dominance without accountability, oversight or challenge.
Also in his message to the Baghdad Arab Summit, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune stressed the crucial need to reform the Arab League, calling it essential to address today's rapidly evolving challenges and high-stakes regional crises.
In Algeria, we believe that this situation must place the urgent reform of our Arab League back at the top of our shared agenda. The League was founded in a different era, under different circumstances, and in a different environment from today's. This makes it imperative to adapt the institutions to the new challenges, rapid developments, and unprecedented stakes of our time. In light of this necessity, we are called upon to rally even more closely around our central cause. Defending it is not an act of charity or generosity on our part. Rather, it is an obligation of historical fidelity that the Arab nation carries on its shoulders and a legal, moral and civilizational responsibility borne by humanity as a whole.
In other news, in Tripoli, a Libyan police officer was fatally shot while securing the Prime Minister's office during anti-government protests. The internationally recognized Government of National Unity confirmed the death, though the attackers remain unidentified. The demonstrations, fueled by recent violence, have already prompted at least 3 ministers and deputies to resign. However, conflicting reports continue to emerge about additional potential departures from the administration. In Libya still, the Government of National Unity reported Saturday that security forces prevented an attempted breach of the Prime Minister's headquarters in Tripoli by what it described as infiltrators among anti-government protesters. In a Facebook statement, the government said demonstrators used Molotov cocktails and iron tools to set fires during the incident, but the attack was repelled without structural damage. The protests demanding the government's resignation continue amid ongoing political tensions. Meanwhile, the Libyan Presidential Council reiterated its commitment to a negotiated political solution to the country's crisis during talks Saturday with the EU Ambassador Nicola Orlando, who reaffirmed Brussels' support for the Council's stabilizing role. In a statement, the Council said discussions focused on security developments and crisis resolution mechanisms to prevent further clashes threatening Tripoli's civilians and infrastructure. In other topical news, the much anticipated meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents appears to be delayed once again. New conditions, fresh battlefield developments, and mounting international pressure are shaping the future of talks, if they happen at all. Salman Asib reports now.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed on Saturday that a meeting between President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky remains contingent on specific agreements between their respective delegations.
There have been many questions about the possibility of a meeting between the two countries' presidents, Zelensky and Putin. Such a meeting is possible. As a result of the work of both delegations, we consider it possible. However, specifically as a result of that work, and once specific results are achieved in the form of agreements between the two sides, what remains most important and fundamental for us is who exactly will sign these documents on the Ukrainian side.
While Peskov didn't clarify what Russia expects, he did underline what he called the fundamental issue, namely, who would sign any future deal on the Ukrainian side. He also insists that ongoing negotiations remain behind closed doors, highlighting the importance of a prisoner exchange. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground continues to escalate. A Russian strike shattered a civilian bus in Samy's northeast, claiming 8 lives and wounding 5 per regional authorities. Meanwhile, Moscow's forces seized Alexandropol in Donetsk, declaring shattered Ukrainian defenses. Over 24 hours, Russia downed 80 drones, intercepted 3 JDMs and rained strikes on 143 targets. On the diplomatic front, the EU is drafting tougher sanctions targeting Russia's energy and finance sectors, yet divisions linger.
And we are ready to do more to bring Putin to the negotiation table. Many of the speakers mentioned it. This war has to end. You said it, Georgia, you said it, Keir. Volodymyr has described with others the roller coaster of the last days. To be very clear again, we want peace. And so we are working on a next set of sanctions. Main elements of this package will be, for example, sanctions on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, further listing of vessels in the shadow fleet and lower the oil price cap, and more sanctions on Russia's financial sector.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, US President Donald Trump has announced plans to call President Putin on Monday. Writing on his Truth social platform, Trump said he hopes to help end what he described as bloodbath, adding to the war in Ukraine should never have happened. Trump also confirmed he would speak later with Ukrainian President Zelensky and several NATO leaders, expressing hope for a ceasefire and a productive day. As diplomacy stalls, civilians pay the price. With over 10,000 dead since 2022, the world watches and waits for a breakthrough.
On a different note, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei on Saturday rejected US President Donald Trump's recent overtures, declaring his calls for regional peace unworthy of response and false. The rebuke came after Trump urged Tehran to swiftly accept US terms on its nuclear program or face severe consequences. This comes as Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian criticized US President Donald Trump for making contradictory statements by speaking of peace while issuing threats. Speaking on Saturday at the ceremony marking the return of the 86th Iranian naval group, Pezeshkian expressed surprise at Trump's remarks, affirming that Tehran is not intimidated and will continue nuclear talks with Washington.
We are negotiating, and we will continue to talk. We are not looking for war, but we are not intimidated by threats either. They should not assume that the threats will deter us from upholding our fundamental human rights. We will not back down. We will not let go of our glorious achievements in military, academic, and nuclear. We are negotiating, and
Shifting focus to U.S. news, Moody's has stripped the United States of its pristine AAA credit rating, downgrading it to AA1 amid concerns over ballooning government debt and unsustainable interest payments, marking the first such move since 1994. The agency now aligns with Fitch and S&P, which had previously demoted the world's largest economy. The Trump administration fired back, with spokesperson Stephen Chung calling the decision politically motivated and slamming Moody's analyses as repeatedly flawed.
While we acknowledge the considerable economic and financial resilience of the United States, we believe that these strengths are no longer sufficient to offset the ongoing deterioration in key fiscal indicators. Our current assessment indicates that this persistent fiscal decline has already begun to adversely affect the capacity of these strands to sustain the highest level of credit worthiness. The rising debt burden and its servicing costs are depleting resources that could otherwise be directed toward bolstering future growth and enhancing competitiveness. Therefore, our decision to downgrade the credit rating reflects our growing concern that the current trajectory of U.S. public finances poses a genuine long-term sustainability challenge.
In the meantime, President Donald Trump revealed plans to issue country-specific tariff letters in the coming days, a move that would effectively replace bilateral trade negotiations. The letters will outline fixed tariff rates while allowing affected nations to appeal the decisions. Shifting from geopolitical tensions to global trade developments now, Vietnam and the United States are now negotiating a potential 46% reduction in planned tariffs set to take effect in July. Vietnam's Commerce Ministry voiced cautious optimism on Saturday, stating that technical talks are progressing, though warned that the pending U.S. duties could significantly impact Hanoi's economic growth if no agreement is reached. On a similar note, Washington and Brussels have begun high-stakes trade negotiations to bridge divisions over tariffs, with both sides exchanging formal proposals for the first time. According to the Financial Times, the talks will focus on tariff reductions, digital trade, and investment rules. The European Commission reportedly warned EU member states to approach U.S. demands cautiously, signaling potential tensions ahead. And from trade policy to economic restructuring, the U.S. Federal Reserve announced plans to reduce its workforce by approximately 10% over the next few years as part of government-wide spending rationalization efforts. According to an internal document obtained by Bloomberg, the cuts will include a voluntary resignation program for eligible staff at its Washington, D.C. headquarters. The Fed currently employs about 24,000 workers across its branches.
At the Federal Reserve, we believe it's essential to review our staffing levels and resources on a regular basis. I've directed the board's leadership to look for gradual ways to consolidate certain rules, modernize work practices, and make sure our size matches the duties Congress has given us. The voluntary separation program we plan to introduce will open new avenues for our colleagues' professional growth and help us prepare to meet our critical responsibilities in the years ahead. We remain committed to keeping the central bank efficient and effective while continuing to serve the U.S. economy at the highest possible standard.
Let's catch up on more news stories making headlines around the world with Yasin Eric T in the News in Brief.
At least 23 farmers and fishermen were killed in an armed attack on Thursday in the village of Malam Karanti, Borno State, northeastern Nigeria. Reuters reported that gunmen gathered the victims near the village before executing them. An elderly man was spared and later altered the community. Several others were reportedly abducted. The European Union's pipeline gas imports dropped by 2% in April 2025, reaching 12 billion cubic meters, down from 12.5 billion cubic meters in March. According to the energy platform, this marks a 9% decline compared to April 2024. Total imports for the first 4 months of 2025 stood at 48.2 billion cubic meters, reflecting a 10% year-on-year decrease. Gold prices fell by 10% at the close of trading on Friday, settling at $3,500 per ounce, as trade tensions between the United States and China eased. In the spot market, gold traded at $3,180 per ounce, marking its worst weekly performance in 6 months. The State of Palestine is taking part in the Osaka World Expo in Japan. Rafat Al-Rayan, director of the Palestinian Pavilion, highlighted the importance of showcasing the Palestinian presence, stating that the participation sends a message of Palestine's rich history, heritage, and Palestinian people who seek life.
And that's the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, you can always check our social media platforms as well as our website. I'm Islam Said on behalf of all 24 News team. Thank you for tuning in and good night.